2019 to order. Miss Ruby, would you please do our invocation?
Yes, I will. Shall we stand?
Yes.
Our Father and our strong God, we come this evening, our Father, in the name of Jesus. We just come to say thank you, Lord, for this day, for your mercy, your goodness, your kindness. Thank you that you are everlasting Father, our eternal home. And now, Holy Spirit, we just welcome you into this meeting. We ask, Lord God, that you just help us, guide us, direct us. For you said in your word to trust you and not to lean unto our own understanding. You said in all of our ways to acknowledge you, and you would direct our path. And so, Father, we ask for direction today in the name of Jesus. And all the people who believe in Jesus the Christ said amen.
Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay. Motion's approved.
No, you take a vote.
Well, there's two already made a motion.
Okay. All right.
But it
the
agenda is approved.
You're right. Sorry. You're right. I'm sorry.
Al, are you going to kind of read these off as you typically do in a regular meeting?
I will.
Okay.
First agenda item is a discussion recommendation to amend section 38-1 sub B of the Code of Ordinances to employ the services of a rating specialist not less than every 5 years to study and review the rates then in effect and suggest changes. And we are talking about utility rates. In your agenda package, there's a little memorandum. Presently, section 38-1 sub B of the Code of Ordinances requires the city to employ the services of a rating specialist not less than once annually to study and review the utility rates then in effect and suggest changes. We suggest that we change that to employ the services of a rating specialist not less than every 5 years to study and review the rates, and that's utility rates, then in effect and suggest changes. And behind there you see the code section. The reason we make that recommendation is that to do each utility, water, sewer, gas, and electric, each utility costs between $2,000 and $5,000 to study the rates. This is charged to us by Analytic Services of the Electric Cities of Georgia, an independent agent who studies the rates. We suggest, and we have done so with electric rates, we have set them for 5 years. So to employ them annually just runs up the cost to the city, and we suggest this is a way to save money. You obviously can employ them if something catastrophic would happen more than once every 5 years, but you're not obligated. Right now, the city manager is obligated to have them study the rates every year, which costs, again, in the totality, about $10,000 to $15,000. So we suggest that this is an appropriate change to the Code of Ordinances.
Question.
Yes,
Yes.
sir?
The decisions we make here go to the council on something like this, correct?
Correct. It's a recommendation to the
Recommendation for
council.
approval.
Then
Okay.
it'll be on the work session of November the 11th if the recommendation is made.
Motion to recommend. If you want to do it that way, I'm not sure. Or you want to just have a discussion?
Well, we need ultimately a vote to recommend it to the council.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
Okay, with that being said, it's approved that we recommend this to the city council for the work session. Now, I do have a question. With this being said, if we chose to, with it worded like this, we couldn't do the rate study in 3 years?
Oh, we could.
Okay.
It's not less than 5 years.
That answered my question. And we don't have to go out 5 years if we think there's a need for a rate study.
Correct.
Okay.
Basically, how it comes out, I look at the rates, I look at the margin, and if the margin is acceptable, like in gas, we don't have a rate study. Pardon me, that was a misstatement. We have a rate study because it's required annually, but it's non-sequitur because the margin doesn't change. And the rate in place is appropriate. This is just a way to save money.
Okay, that will be recommended to the council.
The next item on the agenda is a discussion recommendation to amend section 2.02 sub F of the charter requiring that candidates seeking election for the office of mayor and council who receive a majority replacing plurality of the votes cast shall be deemed elected. And again, if you look in your agenda package, the charter section 2.02 sub F says those candidates seeking election for the office of mayor and council who receive a plurality of the votes cast shall be deemed elected. That's the original. The recommendation is to replace it with those candidates seeking election for the office of mayor and council who receive a majority of the votes cast shall be deemed elected.
Permission to speak,
Yes, sir.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
It's long overdue. Because so many people sign up to run here, which is certainly appropriate or appreciated, we are getting elected with 30% of the vote, sometimes even less. I got 60-something% of the voters chose someone besides me. And that's just not representative of the community. So this is long overdue. And I don't see any way we're gonna stop having so many people sign up because it's certainly their right to do so, but it's gonna cost money because we're gonna have runoffs. But we would have, we just had 3 people elected, and I don't know, maybe 1 had a majority, but I know 2 did not. So again, over 50% of the citizens voted for someone else, and that person wasn't elected. So this is long overdue, in my opinion. So when you're ready for a motion, if everyone's had their say, I'll say something.
Ms. Ruby, you got anything to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I don't, when I read over these discussion recommendation, I was concerned that it's coming up now, when in previous years, it was not done. And I wonder about the motives at this time. However, and I'm not in accord, I'll just go ahead and say this now, I'm not in accord with this all of these discussion recommendations. I'm not in accord with that. I'm not gonna vote on the recommendation because at this point, I believe it would be to our advantage to call in someone who does not have a dog in the fight. That being said, we may need to look at asking GMA to come in and help us with this charter, because as it appears to me, we are just chipping away at certain items in the charter, and this should not be. I remember Emeritus Johnny Cook saying when he was serving that the charter needed to be tweaked, if you will. I'm not opposed to that. I am opposed to taking little bits and pieces out of it. Now, right now the charter states that the mayor is the ceremony head of the city. Our city manager is an at-will employee. This seems to me you're giving all the power, if you will, to the manager, whether it be Mr. Shaver or who. I just have a problem with that, and I just think we need to bring in an outside source who could look at this from an objective point of view. Thank you so much.
With that being said, Ms. Ruby, this particular change doesn't have anything to do with the mayor and the city manager. We're discussing changing how our elected officials are elected. Now, I'm the one that brought this to the table. I think that the majority is the democratic way to do it. I think that that's the way most municipalities and state governments and our national government elect people, by the majority. I would have thought that anybody here, you would have been a receptive of this. You're the only one recently that's won by the majority. But with that being said, Mr. Sales has recommended that we accept this and recommend it approval to the council. So,
May I say something?
yes.
I want you to hear me clearly, and I just understand, Mr. Waycaster, what I'm saying. I forestated, I'm not in accord with none of the discussion and recommendation on this sheet. Not just one. I'm not in accord with it because I think we should look for outside source. Yes, I did receive a majority, but I want you to understand, I do understand what you're saying. And this is how I feel about this recommendation, if you will.
So, with Mr. Sales, you made a motion.
Motion to accept, and I'll add, there's only one reason not to want the majority of citizens to choose their representative. And that would be because you control a block that will keep you in that plurality and disenfranchise the majority of citizens. This is long overdue, and I do support replacing plurality with majority.
If it's long overdue, why didn't you address it during your watch?
Should have been my mistake. Long overdue. That's why we have, all over the country, you have runoffs. All over the country, so that the citizen, why are we having this discussion? A third grader can do this. I'm sorry, I'm done. I've made my statement.
My my point still stand. You were here 4 years. Why did you address that in the 4 years that you served? That was my only question.
Well, then I'll give you a point. You were right, it should have been done, and Doug Jewell would not be mayor, in my opinion, if he couldn't win with a plurality. I do not believe the man would ever win with a majority, and I may not either, but I know he wouldn't. That's my opinion, and we need to stop disenfranchising the majority of the citizens who come out and vote.
Well, Mr. Sales, with all due respect, when we had the gathering at I can't think of the not Passenger Depot, but the other Freight Depot, and we had the candidate forum. I remember distinctly, and someone there recorded your statement. You stood up and said, even if you don't win, I should not win Doug Jewell or Willie Key. Those were your words. However, the citizen thought differently.
Even what now?
You said even though I may not win, or if I don't win, Doug Jewell, Ruby Hines, and Willie Key should not be elected.
Absolutely.
You said that.
I stand by that.
Yeah.
I definitely, and I believe it today. I believe it today. Yes, I didn't run against Willie Key. I ran against you and Doug Jewell. I rarely said his name. But yeah, I mean it today. I'm sorry that I stand by it today.
With that being said, we have a motion to approve the change in the wording of this ordinance. So, do I have a second? Now, with that being said, I can't.
You can second it.
Okay, well, I second it. With that being said, we'll pass this recommendation on to the city council.
2-1.
Yes. Your vote is no, Ms. Ruby, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay. The next item is discussion recommendation to amend section 3.03 of the charter in line 4 by adding the phrase, should the post of the city manager not be filled, after the words, the mayor may direct for such purposes, and before the words, he shall have. Again, if we look in our agenda packet after that item, the reason this is on the agenda is, and I've put Appendix A of the independent investigation done by John Gall and Les Schneider in the agenda package. And if you go to the second page, the top bullet, the city should introduce changes to ordinance and charter limiting the role of mayor if the city continues to utilize a city manager. So, with that in mind, you see the original section of the charter, the underlined portion at 3.03, administrative duties of the mayor. He shall have the authority to control the work of all offices and employees of the city. The revised copy of the charter would be, should the post of city manager not be filled, he shall have the authority to control the work of all offices and employees of the city. And we're talking about the administrative duties of the mayor. In the opinion of John Gall and Les Schneider, they think or thought that a chain of command should be set up in the charter, not taking away any powers of the mayor, but adding some guidelines as to the chain of command if a city manager is employed by the mayor and city council. So that's where that emanated from. And later, section 304, 3.07, and 3.08 all emanate from the independent investigation done by John Gall and Les Schneider. In fact, all of the remainder of the recommendations come from that report and their caution to set up a chain of command so something like this does not happen again. Since we had this emanated also from the litigation we had with Councilmember King about political signs. So that brings us to the discussion recommendation to amend section 3.03 of the charter.
Motion to amend.
I'll second that. And it's kind of interesting that actually, Jim, you were a little ahead of your time here. Some of these things are some stuff you recommended earlier in the year also, if you remember, and they kind of fell through the cracks, I think. But then after the independent investigation came on, it kind of hit home. It's just that we seem to have two people trying to run the city. I think it creates a conflict. I think there's some resentment. Recently in a meeting, I brought up the working relationship between the city manager and the mayor. The next day, the mayor calls for a meeting between the city manager and the city attorney and himself. Since I had initiated that meeting, and I'm head of the administrative committee, I just thought I'd go to the meeting. When I got there, the mayor had canceled the meeting because the city manager was going to record the meeting. Yeah, I'd like to say one thing right here while I got a little opportunity. Anything that goes on in this city hall, there shouldn't be anything that couldn't be recorded other than personnel issues. Everything should be right on top of the table. So why would you cancel a meeting about a working relationship because it's going to be recorded? And I've said all along that I thought that we needed to make some minor charter changes. We're not taking away nothing from the mayor. We hire and pay a man to run this city, and I just want him to be able to do that. So I guess we've got 2 votes to 1 again. You vote no, Ms. Ruby?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we will pass this on to the city council at the work session.
Okay, the next recommendation, again, is to amend section 304 of the charter in line 2 by deleting the phrase, "who shall be the chief managerial aide to the mayor." And again, I have put in the agenda package the original, which is section 3.04, city manager. Should the post of city manager be filled, the city manager shall be appointed by the mayor and council, who shall be the chief managerial aide to the mayor. And the revised would state section 3.04, city manager. Should the post of city manager be filled, the city manager shall be appointed by the mayor and council. Deleting that phrase, we go to the next sentence. He shall have the authority to appoint, promote, demote, transfer, suspend, and remove all employees and thereon. So, Again, recommendation coming out of the independent investigation.
With that being said, do we have a motion to accept this change in section 3.04?
I want to, may I discuss the motion?
Sure.
Or either way you want to put it. All we're doing here is setting up standard, normal business practices so that we run this business wisely. We're in a position up here. We're here because we got a plurality of votes from the people that went there. We're not here, they didn't elect us because we're qualified to run all the employees of the city, to run all the departments. We certainly want to have an input and a say. Then we turn around and hire somebody with a college education, professional experience, and knowledge who can run the business. And so what we really need to do is, number one, lean on him. Now, if we just disagree with what he's doing, we need to go talk to him, and we've done that. We don't need to bypass him and go change what he's doing out in the field. And that's what we're talking about here. If we've got a problem, we disagree, our problem's with the city manager. And if it's big enough, we need to make a change. If he's not doing his job, we need to make him make the changes or replace him. But he's the one that needs to handle these employees out there. Now, my business has grown such that I have a manager. And I met him for lunch today because there were a couple of things I wanted done differently. Now, in my case, I tell him he's going to do it, but the last thing I would do is bypass him, go to the employees and say, don't do it that way, you do it this way. When you undermine good people, capable people, you shut them down. You micromanage a good person and he stops thinking because you're going to change what he's doing. So he waits for you to tell him what to do as opposed to being out in the field, solving the problems and getting things done. There's nothing we're doing here that isn't normal business practice. We're trying to clean this up, straighten this up, so we can hold Al, our hired employee, responsible for the way the city is run, instead of just having to throw up our hands and wait 4 years for another election if we're unhappy there. So I motion that we make this change. Thank you.
I'll second that motion. You're no.
It's no, and I just want to reiterate and make this crystal clear. I believe when in the situation we are in, to have a mayor and a manager and whomever else, I believe if they communicate, and I said this earlier, I believe if they had a meeting several days in the week to share with what was going on so that both could be abreast of what is going on in the city. A time just to sit down and talk about what needs to happen and what is happening and build that relationship. I believe we could see a smooth operation going on in our city. Maybe you two gentlemen see something that I don't see. I see that if these two people work together, this charter could remain as it is, with the understanding that we could bring in the attorney from GMA and maybe organize a diverse group of citizens to look at this charter and see what needs to be taken out, added, or deleted. I just think that this is a better way than just chipping away at certain things. That's how I feel. And that is for the record, Madam Clerk.
I got a little statement. You know, I guess maybe that there's people here that don't understand when you see cities the size of Grantville that have a city manager and a mayor, hardly any of them's charter reads like ours. Now, if you take over here to Luthersville, where they have a mayor and don't have a city manager, sure, their choice, somebody's got to run the place, but the mayor does. And there's been some decisions been made since I've been elected that weren't made by the city mayor, that were made by the mayor, that there wasn't no discussion. They didn't work together. It was done because of the way the charter reads, and it gives the mayor the right to do things like that. Now, I'm not qualified to run this city. Most elected officials ain't. That's why you hire somebody that is qualified. And nobody's trying to take anything away from the mayor here, but I think that there's been no effort by him to work with anybody. Anybody that would oppose these charter changes is a power wheeling, and they out for themselves. That's the way I look at it. This is only like, and when you want to talk about GMA, you know, I have already brought sample charter changes, charters from other cities by our elected state officials. So, you know, if you want to talk bigger and without us handling this in house, I guess we can go there too. They support this. They know Grantland's charter's unique. It's outdated. They know that already.
Mr. Wakehaser,
Yes.
all I'm suggesting is to get another opinion and possibly form a diverse group of citizens. It does not matter to me if the mayor has a PhD or a GED. I have seen people with PhDs eat in all the other degrees. And I've also seen people who did not have an education but had common sense and could get the job done. So I'm a little concerned when we lay emphasis, and degrees are wonderful. I'm a little concerned that we lay so much emphasis on a degree and what a person has. All of us have been given gifts and abilities. We just need to use them. And I think GMA would be an asset rather than a hindrance. My opinion on it.
Well, let me respond to that, Jim. When you talk about degrees and all this, you know what? I'm probably about as uneducated as anybody that sits up here on this council. So all I'm saying, you can hire skill. Anybody can get elected. You can take it the way you want to, but you kind of offend me when you talk about education, because I ain't the smartest guy in the world, but I think I got plenty of common sense.
Well, you know what? I did not make my statement to offend you. And if you are offended, then that's of your own choosing. I was just making a statement.
Yeah, we're not discussing the giant white elephant in the room that is causing all the problems in the city of Grantville, the money wasted, the embarrassment of that wall over there, the unprofessional, incompetent way. We're not talking about that white elephant. We made our motions. We can talk to doomsday, but we know what's going on here. We know what the deal is. And it's not about, with everyone sitting up here, taking care of the budget, the citizens of Grantville, and running this city like it's a business for the citizens that elected us. That's not what all of us are doing.
Okay, where we left off was 2 motions to recommend the last section change that was mentioned.
3.04.
Okay.
So that'll be 2 to 1
2 to 1.
recommend. The next item is discussion recommendation to add a new paragraph to Charter 3.04. Again, if we look at Charter section 3.04, this was another recommendation that came out of the independent investigation. It basically says the city manager shall notify the mayor and the city council as soon as feasible of all work being performed on city property, save for ordinary repair and maintenance activities, identifying who is performing the work and the funding source. This was a recommendation out of the independent investigation wherein the city council felt that they were not informed about the work on the cemetery retaining wall, so they suggested adding a new paragraph to Charter Section 3.04, which is a section dealing with the city manager, and they suggested the paragraph should say, the city manager shall notify the mayor and city council as soon as feasible of all work being performed on city property, save for ordinary repair and maintenance activities, identifying who is performing the work and the funding source.
So we're talking about an email sent out when you've got the people from Luthersville over here tearing up the street, something like that? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, sir. Well, a good example will be when we start the passenger depot.
Oh, okay.
It'll be my responsibility, shall notify the mayor and city council of all work being performed on city property, identifying who is performing the work and the funding source. They felt this was something the city manager didn't do with the cemetery retaining wall because the council was left out of any knowledge or adequate knowledge of that work.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. No.
Yes.
2 yeses and a no that we recommend this to the council.
Okay. Okay, the next is a discussion recommendation to amend section 3.07 of the charter in line 1 by adding the phrase after the word charter, the city manager if the post is filled or otherwise. So I have placed in the agenda package the original charter section where 3.07 speaks about administrative and service departments. As it is now, it says, except as otherwise provided in this charter, comma, the mayor and city council by ordinance shall prescribe the functions or duties and establish, abolish, alter, consolidate, or leave vacant all non-elected officers, positions, or employment department and agencies of the city as necessary for the proper administration of the affairs and government of this city. The revised edition would say, and again, this is the recommendation to set up a chain of command, except as otherwise provided in this charter, the city manager, if the post is filled or otherwise, mayor and city council by ordinance shall prescribe the functions or duties and establish, abolish, alter, consolidate, or leave vacant all non-elected officers, positions of employment, departments, and so forth. It just sets up a chain of command, does not take away from the duties of the mayor and council.
Al, can you explain that in my terms and just, can you explain it simply?
Well, basically, when we talk about the administrative and service departments, someone has to direct them. And right now, the charter says the mayor and city council by ordinance shall prescribe the functions or duties. And with the revision, it would say the city manager, if the post is filled, shall prescribe the functions or duties and establish. If the post is not filled, then it reverts to the mayor and city council by ordinance shall prescribe the functions or duties of the respective administrative and service departments.
We're just, again, holding the city manager accountable for the day-to-day operation of the city. Motion to approve.
I'll second it. No. 2-1.
The last item, if there's no other business, is the discussion recommendation to amend section 3.0 of the charter in line 2 by adding the phrase city manager if the post is filled or otherwise by the mayor and city council. If we look at section 3-08, which is in the agenda package, 3-08 talks about personnel policies. The original says, all employees serve at will and may be removed from office at any time by the mayor and city council unless otherwise provided by ordinance. This was specifically referenced in the independent investigation by John Gall and Les Snyder, and the revised edition would say in section 3.08, personnel policies, all employees serve at will and may be removed from office at any time by the city manager if the post is filled or otherwise by the mayor and city council unless otherwise provided by ordinance. I will say this, and it's not in the agenda package, but in a former career, I was an employment lawyer. And in government, you cannot instinctively, that means instantly, remove someone from employment. They have certain due process rights. And you will find yourself in court very quickly if you violate their due process rights. We have had, during my tenure, 2 individuals that I can remember being removed from employment. To do that, they were given notice of charges, an opportunity to respond, which is fundamental due process. And as pointed out in the independent investigation, to remove someone without due process opens yourself to vast amounts of litigation. And I think we have one case in court from a previous administration on that very subject. So, we recommend it.
Motion to approve.
I'll second it. No, Ms. Ruby?
Oh,
That's the last item on the agenda.
Unless anybody has any other business, sir?
Jim?
No, I do not. As I said last night, I really try to represent the citizens of Grantville. Employees are very important, but when it gets down to it, we are here to look after the money that we are taking from the citizens. That's why we're here. We're handling someone else's money, and we've got a duty. We've got a duty and a responsibility to do that wisely and not be operating in a manner that is not professional and not fiscally responsible. So I appreciate the meeting. Some effort went into this. All we're trying to do, everything here just moves the responsibility as it should be, as it was when I was mayor. It moves the responsibility to the hired city manager, and we'll hold him accountable for running the day-to-day operation efficiently, and instead of not knowing who's responsible for what. And this is just smart business. So I appreciate the work that went into arranging this for the citizens of Grantville. Thank you.
Ms. Ruby?
would just like to say, I recall during a previous administration, the manager was dismissed, and then the chief of police was hired as the manager, and so he came in, and then his tenure ended. I think everybody who know me know that I have the highest interests of our citizens at heart. And I'm concerned about our financial situation. I'm concerned about everything in this city, and will do my utmost to do whatever I can to bring to our city officials what our citizens are saying. In fact, have complaints about one of our employees, and I will not discuss that publicly. I will discuss it with the manager and the mayor, and they can take it from there. But if we all, as I forestated, if we all could just work together in a better way, I think that we could get much accomplished. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ruby. You know, this is something that I've put some thought in and worked on for a while, and some of this Councilmember Sales initiated earlier in the year. And then the independent investigation had some recommendations in it, and I don't think that people realize there's a lot more in that investigative report than people realize. If you hadn't read it and read it in detail, it's pretty interesting. You know, I don't want to turn our charter upside down. I would like to see our charter lean more toward a strong council charter than a strong mayor charter. I think that's typical this day and time. You know, years ago, I can even see I've made the comment that in times in the past, probably, you know, one person did need to be in charge here, you know, with some of the people that's been involved in politics here over time. But I just think this is the way that most other cities operate. I guess if you're the mayor or support the mayor or want to be the mayor, this might not sit very well with you. But I think for the overall, the general public elects for us as councilman and a mayor, that it kind of does create a chain of command, and ultimately the council and the mayor are still in charge of the city, just not on a day-to-day operative way. But thank y'all for being here, and thank you for listening. And these is all recommendations for the council to consider.
Do you want to take any citizens' comments?
Or were there any turned in?
Didn't know we had to.
Didn't know you had to turn in something to make a citizen's comment?
Could you state your name, where you live, sir?
Yeah.
You don't have to now, so Mark did.
Mark King, 8 Huntington Drive in Grantville. It's very nice to see that the recommendations of the independent counsel investigating the failure of the cemetery retaining wall was taken to heart. A lot of it, as Mr. Saul says, is long overdue. And to change our method of government would be wrong. We need to have a strong mayor. We need to have a strong city manager. And when they can get along, we can get a lot done. When they and everybody has disagreements. But as Mr. Sales says, when you hire a manager to do a job, you give that manager the job. You don't undermine him. You give him the direction, and he takes it. With the right manager and the right mayor, this can be a wonderful city, much better than it is. And to make those changes is very well worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
You have already discounted most of what I'm about to say, and I'm going to try to maintain my composure here. First of all, Mr. Waycasser.
Does that mean you're upset?
It certainly does.
Surprised.
First of all, I don't think that you, as the chairman of this committee, have the authority to second a motion. Now, I think you need to, but I'll leave that. You need to read your Robert's Rules of Order. The second thing is, Mr. Sells, when you were mayor, we were in the same position in that the city manager had charge. The city charter was changed. You were not in office any more than 6 weeks till you brought it up and you had it changed back where the mayor was in charge, and that's what you're dealing with here today. So,
Can you be specific of what you're talking about?
yes, we're talking about putting the city manager in charge of the day-to-day activities of the city. Just what was outlined here in section 3.08 and 3.07 and so forth.
You're saying I took over running day-to-day from the city manager?
You had the city charter changed back to what it was before you came into office, which is exactly the way it is right now.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about because you're not.
Oh, you have a limited memory, I guess. I'll move on. And Mr. Waycasser, I'm not quite sure what you meant when you said if anybody was against these changes, something about power. I don't know what you're talking about there. Do you remember that comment?
Yeah.
What was it about?
It was power wielding. That means somebody that thrives off of power, that wants to be in charge. When they're
So in other words, if I'm against these changes, are you referring to a citizen?
That means if you were talking about if you were in a position, kind of like being head of the historical committee.
And if I were against these changes, that
Somebody that doesn't want the changes, that wants to keep them in place.
the other thing has to do with this independent counsel. I really have a problem with these changes being taken up from an investigation by an independent counsel who was hired by the city manager. I really have a problem with that.
Selma, you don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe you don't either.
Well, I'll clarify that. If you're saying I hired John Gall and Les Snyder, you are incorrect.
I didn't say that.
You said hired by the city manager.
You said, as I recall, that you did not, that you knew him or something. There's a familiarity there. And that brings into question what was in their report in my mind.
Well, that's fine, and you can say that. I brought 4 names to the administrative committee.
And this was the one you recommended, wasn't it?
Correct.
Okay.
Just because I brought 4 names and I recommended somebody doesn't say I hired him. They were hired by the city council. Now, you're absolutely right. I recommended John Gall, Jeffrey Todd, Andrew Whalen, and Jeff Todd were all the other names. Based on the background, knowledge, and experience, I recommended John Gall. I stand by that. I have never practiced law with John Gall. I have never practiced law with Les Snyder. I have never practiced law with Jeff Todd. And I have never practiced law with Andrew Whalen. But I know their reputations. So, that's my professional opinion. You may disagree with it, and that's fine. But don't say I hired him, because that is not correct.
All
and that's
right.
exactly what you said.
Okay. Then I stand corrected. But nevertheless, I think he was your first choice.
Did you happen to see the responses that we got back from those different attorneys, Selma?
No.
You don't really know what you're talking about. The Jonathan Gall's response to the
What now?
the qualifications in the response he sent back was almost double of what anybody else sent back. I mean, he was much more thorough when he responded to all the questions that were asked and what his qualifications were. You really don't know what you're talking about.
All right. That's your opinion.
And then on top of that, the city manager recommended a defense attorney.
No, not the city manager.
I mean the city attorney. I'm sorry. Recommended a defense attorney. What was it? Why did we need? That was strange. I mean, this was a construction project that involved a municipality.
I know one of those men that you
defense
just
attorney.
mentioned as an attorney, and I think he's a very competent attorney, but that's an aside. What I have a problem with is giving this power to someone that does not live here, that would have no accountability, that the citizens would not be able to voice their opinion in the next election. How do we hold people accountable?
He works for the city council, Selma. You know what? Have you got the time to run?
No, I'm through. And Ruby, I'm sure you're wondering why you were here today, because they really didn't need you. There was a meeting before the meeting, and that was quite obvious.
Well, you're wrong about that too.
You're not getting away with that, lady. You are not getting away with that, lady. Let me tell you.
There was.
Oh my goodness! You know the white elephant. The white elephant. You're up here taking care of your
that's
buddy.
another thing. You scheduled the meeting when the mayor couldn't even be here.
Why not?
Because he works. And I told you before you ever qualified to run, that there would be times that you might have to leave your job and come and work. You have that ability to leave your work. The mayor does not. Hey, why did you not schedule this when the mayor could be here?
Well, the mayor's going to see all this, and you know what? I need to be at work right now myself.
So do I.
And I can't be here in the evening.
So do I. I need to put something on the record. When I showed up at 2:02, and I apologize for being late, when I showed up I didn't have a clue what was here. I have not met with...
Oh, crap.
Now, you know what? You know, you're who you are, Selma Cody. You're who you are.
Let's stop.
I didn't have a clue, and I sat here and go, whoa, we've got a lot of stuff here. Now, he knew how I would vote because he knows I'm a businessman. He's a businessman. And as he stated multiple times, Mr. Sells brought this stuff up before. I'm an open book. I don't have to hide. I don't need a secret meeting because I'm straight up. I've got one agenda, and that's the citizens of Grantville. And guess what? Yes, it does help Jim Sells. It helps all of us. That's my agenda. I don't have to hide, and I don't need a plurality and avoid the majority to get elected. All right?
Can I have a motion that we
No,
adjourn?
before you have this motion, Mrs. Cody, when you say I shouldn't have bothered to come, I attend these meetings for the 509 people who put me in office. And I'm not concerned about anything else but the citizen concern. I respect these gentlemen that I serve with, and I'm not surprised by however the vote goes. But I'm here for the ones who voted for me. That's why I'm here.
Okay,
Can I just say one thing on citizens' comments?
yes.
Marion Cisic, putting on the Grain Street. You know what, this last meeting, I don't know how the administrative committee overlooks the HPC. It's still by and large a train wreck. You know, I've been persecuted for a year over this stupid shed. Mostly because of Chairman Selma Cody. Chairman Selma Cody the other day had it on the agenda that she was going to, what, you want me to stop?
Yeah, personal attacks.
Well, it's not, I'm talking about the HPC. Y'all entertain a motion to have or not have hearings on certificate of appropriateness.
Well, that's not set in stone yet, so you really...
Yes, I understand that. But we, as the HPC, we never voted to let the chairman present that to the council. I would think
that's interesting to know.
I would think that we would vote on that first. To have, again, another caboose off the train wreck. And as far as the only way you're going to have an HPC is if you had citizens within that district that are gung-ho enthusiastic about it. You're not going to legislate it to those people. And that's what we do. And we do pick certain people out, like Councilman Jim Sales, who cannot put his buildings up there because of obstructionists on that HPC. We need the money. The vacant lots are there. Put the damn buildings up. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if that's everybody, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.